Can you imagine never feeling normal again unless you consume the very thing that made you that way? Addiction is a highly prevalent, serious health condition that more people should be educated about. Addiction happens in your brain. It happens when drugs go into your brain and they physically change it and affect it. And there's devastating effects of addiction, both physically and mentally, on the person who's addicted and their surrounding community and family members. Addiction is very prevalent in today's society and highly prevalent in life, as you can see, maybe in your family members, community, government, or even economy. But I personally live in an area where addiction is pretty common. I could be on the way to my grandma's house, going to my friend's house, going shopping, or dropping off a friend, and I'll most likely see a person in addiction on the way there. They could either be on the side of the road, in a gas station, or even sitting outside their house. And I also have been researching this topic, the science of addiction, for over a month. And once I graduate high school and college, I plan to go into the medical field to help those who are suffering from addiction. Please look at number 1 worksheet I handed out earlier. Do you know what neurons are? Well, if you don't, there's a photo of one right there. Your brain and neurons are the building blocks, or what I call the building blocks of addiction, because they're the things that truly get affected first. Neurons are little message carriers in your brain that send out signals to other neurons in your brain to communicate. As suggested by H. Dwyer and Neurons published it in 2010. Also, as I said earlier, the brain is also a building block for addiction and is highly susceptible to addiction, especially these certain parts of your brain. The basal ganglia, excited amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex are highly affected by drugs, as suggested by the National Institute on Drug Abuse on the Drugs and Brain page published in 2020. I've also learned about neurons in the brain in my psychology class, which I also take with my oral communications class at Anne Community College. But speaking of brains, let's continue about the actual addiction on brains. If you could, please look at number 2 page. What you see there is the ventral tegmentum. It's a part of the brain when stimulated makes pleasure. And it's also rich in neurotransmitters, which is the perfect place for drugs to take action, as suggested by E. Henderson in Understanding Addiction, published in 2001. Drugs physically change how your brain is. Drugs cling to the neurons and the receptors and the transmitters to neurons, and they fake arousal. As you can see, why the ventral tegmentum was a perfect place for drugs to take action. They cling to these neurons and they fake arousal, and the increased feelings of arousal can physically change your brain in something called neuroplasticity, as suggested by the National Institute on Drug Abuse on the Drug and Brain page published in 2020. But now you may be saying, well, I've only heard of addiction in the brain. It can't be any physical harm to you, right? Well, there can be physical harm. There can be brain damage, risk of overdose, insomnia, increased violence, and even relationship problems if you're addicted or affected drugs. Also, there are some physical effects. Paranoia, hallucinations, insomnia, like I said earlier, seizures, asthma, thrombosis. You can be at a high risk for other health problems, including cancer, vein abscences, and needle-like cause infections, as suggested by Jay Healy in Drugs and Addiction, published in 2014. Also, with the increased take of drugs, you can also get something called tolerance. You can't really get it, but you will build up something called tolerance. Tolerance is when your body builds a sort of immunity to the drug, so you need to take more and more and more to get that high feeling. The increased drug take makes addiction worse, and it also causes impairment and distress, as suggested by L. Tennyson in Addiction, published in 2018. But now, you may be saying, why am I learning about addiction? I don't know if anybody's addicted, I'm not addicted, who around me could be addicted? Well, it could be hiding in plain sight. I don't know if most of you guys have known, but maybe 5 or 8 years ago, there was a popular YouTube channel called The Try Guys. On The Try Guys, it consisted of 4 guys, and one of them was Ned. Ned seemed like a pretty normal guy. He had a wife and kids, and he seemed pretty normal. But about a couple years ago, he came out and said he was addicted to painkillers. He's been addicted to painkillers on the whole duration of Try Guys, and he was getting off them now. And that just concludes how addiction can be hiding in plain sight. Addiction can also have a very mental and emotional effect on you, as can be seen in the book A House on Stilts. I would recommend reading because it shows addiction and it can happen to anyone. It shows a mother who's helping her son battle addiction on opioids. It can show the underlying mental struggle and emotional struggle that family of the addicted can have. But addiction is highly prevalent in today's society, and it's a very, very serious health condition. Addiction happens in the brain when drugs go and physically change it, and there's devastating effects of addiction, both physically and mentally, not only on the addicted person, but the surrounding family. Drugs cling to neurons, transmitters, and receptors, and they fake feelings of arousal. These fake feelings of arousal physically change the brain in something called neuroplasticity. Also, addiction can also physically change your body and can cause, well, like I said earlier, paranoia, other health problems, and even asthma. But please, addiction is dangerous and is a current epidemic. If you or a loved one is suffering, please do not hesitate to reach out. Don't do drugs, and please be safe.